There we are, thanks. Yeah, we are just a bit quiet so we can start. We're switched on. And so today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Will members please use their microphone to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the planning committee, and any mobile phones, iPads are switched off or on silent. We have apologies from Councillor John Jones, Councillor Perkins, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Watkins. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of September. Can we simply propose that they're a true record? Thank you, second. Thank you. Are there any matters arising from them? No. Okay, thank you. So item number 1 today is application number 220264. 21 Gay Road, Newport. This will be presented by Steve Williams.
Thank you, Chair.
Right,
I'll just share my screen.
Sorry,
voice. Okay.
Okay. Morning, everyone. The application is relating to 21 Gare Road, which is a semi-detached property in the Gare. The application is seeking to retain a garden room, which is partway through construction in the rear garden. And the application has been called to committee at the request of Councillor Marshall. So the property concerned, you can see, is highlighted with the red marker there, and the shed is being built right at the bottom of the garden, towards the right-hand side in this photograph, and that's looking in the other direction. So you can see it's right at the bottom in this location here. And they've also erected a timber fence here as well. This shows the layout. It's a relatively small room, a building, and it's proposed to be a garden room / guest room, and it's got a shower room facility there as well. I've just swiveled it round. That's how it looks in the plot. So you've got double doors facing into the garden, and then a window facing up towards the host dwelling, and then a shower window which is facing towards the rear. These show the elevations. So you can see it's approximately 4.3 metres by 4.1 metres. So this is the elevation that looks into the garden, so the west elevation. This is the elevation that is north-facing towards the house. This is the east elevation, so it faces towards number 61 Lansdowne Road, And then the south elevation, this is a shower window. And then these just show the elevations with an indication of the hedge that is on the rear boundary. And it's shown to, the walls are to be finished with a dashed render, and then the roof, which is flat, would be fiberglass. So these photographs have been taken from the patio of the main house. As you can see, there's a timber fence. Sorry, back up. There's a timber fence there, and you can see the shed that's been erected. That's the elevation that faces into the garden. You can see the timber fence that's dividing the building from the rest of the garden. That's looking from the building towards the west boundary. As you can see that the neighbour to the west, the adjoining semi-detached property, is well screened with this timber fence. That's the north elevation looking up towards the house. And then again, that's the same window we just looked at. As you can see, the properties in the distance there are on Lansdowne Road. And that window there is the same window I've just showed you, looking up towards the house. So it just looks onto this timber fence. And then this is the shower room with an obscure glazed window. You can just see the hedgerow on the rear boundary there that screens it from the neighbour to the other side. And then you can see this high hedge, laurel hedge there, that screens the rear boundary. And then this photograph, if I just show you where this is taken from. So it's a photograph taken from this property here. From this property here. So you can imagine the shed is there. So there you go. That's taken from that garden. So you can see that there's a drop in level, but it is well screened from the garden. You can just about see the shed there, set behind this hedge. That's taken from the bathroom window of this property, so you obviously got a bit more of an elevated view of it. So in terms of the issues, well, in terms of design, it's a relatively small building. It's got a very basic design, but it's considered to be acceptable in this rear garden location. In terms of impact on neighbours, it's a relatively low-level structure, largely obscured from neighbours by existing boundary treatment. It's not overbearing, and it wouldn't cause a loss of privacy. In terms of the use, a number of the neighbours are concerned about the potential use of the building. I think they're wondering what's proposed in terms of subdividing it from the rest of the garden with a fence, and there's concern that it's potentially going to be used as a separate dwelling or a holiday let. But the applicant has assured us that their intention is not to use it for those purposes. It is to be ancillary to the main house. It's to remain part of the dwelling, and we've imposed a planning condition to make sure that it's abundantly clear that this is what we're approving. In terms of the issue of the fence and the alleged subdivision of the plot, again the applicant has assured us that it's not their intention to subdivide and create a new planning unit or create a new residential unit. They are simply just dividing it from the rest of the garden. And so in that sense, that's what their intention is. So we cannot prove that there's any proposal to subdivide the plot, and that doesn't need planning permission. So we're recommending that the application for the shed is granted subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We now have the public speaker. There was somebody speaking, objecting, Mark Whitcomb, but unfortunately he's unable to make it. So we do have a Mr. Sean Barringer who'd like to speak in favour of it, and you've got 5 minutes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, the original intention for the building was to be used as an outbuilding, as an office, a bit of extra storage. Due to circumstances that changed, my client's son and daughter had to move back home. One of them in particular is disabled, so they need extra space in the house. There is over 7 of them all staying in the house, so then obviously we stopped work at the point where it went past permitted planning, and put in the application for it to be converted over so we can actually have someone stay in there. Obviously everything that we built there was built within permitted. We made sure it wasn't obscuring anyone. The fence was actually put up purely as a retaining wall more than anything, and not only that, the properties that run down the side, all of their fences were quite low and quite badly damaged, so we run the fence then down the side as well, just to purely hide all of that really, without having to retain all of their properties. So it was more of a cost benefit than anything. Obviously, as you know, the property itself costs quite a bit to make anyway. So now we just want to sort of put across the urgency that we need it changed so we can actually have someone stay in there. But it's not going to be rented out or anything like that that they've put in there. It's solely for family members to use. Yeah.
Thank you. Now go on to members' questions. Anybody have any questions? Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Was there a previous application for this plan for this before, or no, or has it just come straight to plan as a retention?
No, I'm not aware of a previous application. Work had started. Obviously, we were alerted to that, so we advised the applicant they needed to submit a plan application retrospectively because they were partway through construction. So this is the application that's before us.
Yes, so with that then, in it puts an application be submitted then for the size of the property itself, for the actual building, over a certain amount of distance. Is it 3 metres by 3 metres? After that, you've got to have a plan permission for that, though?
Yeah, there are permitted development rights throughout buildings, and the only reason that this needs an application at all is that it's marginally over the height of permitted development. It's just slightly over the height of it, so that's why it needs an application, is because of the dimensions of it.
Are there any other questions? Anybody at home? No? So do we have somebody to propose that that the recommendation is accepted, granted with conditions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Owls. And somebody to second? Councillor Jordan. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, the second item today is 220814, site Newport Centre, Kingsway, Newport. And this will be presented by Gail Parkhouse, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is application 220814, and it relates to the Newport Centre. And it's an application for outline planning permission for the demolition of the Newport Centre and then its redevelopment for around 54,000 square metres of educational use. You'll note that the applicant includes Coleg Gwent, or any other use within this list. So A1, shops, A2, financial and professional services, A3, food, B1, businesses, offices, C1, hotels, D1, non-residential institutions, so that includes things such as clinics, crash, that sort of thing, and D2, which is assembly and leisure. So all matters are reserved, so detail on the design, the scale, layout, landscaping and access are reserved for future. Sorry. So the building within its context. So here's the building here. You have Friars Walk up here and the bus station, Kingsway Centre, shopping centre here and its multi-storey car park. You have Usk Way running north to south along here. The university building here. This site here is where planning permission was recently granted for the new leisure centre. And then also to note, this is Emlyn Street, and there's some residential properties here. And then there's some photos of the site itself. So you have the Kingsway multi-storey car park here. That's the university building here. This is Usk Way. This is one of the side elevations alongside Usk Way. And this is the rear of the building, taken from Emlyn Street, which runs here, and you can see the multi-storey car park here. And then another rear elevation taken from Usk Way this time, and you can just about see the university building there. This is the entrance end to the building, the multi-storey car park here, and then another view of the entrance from the entrance to the multi-storey car park. And then this is a view looking down Emlyn Street. That's the back of the building. You can see those residential properties. And here's a slightly closer view then of those residential properties on Emlyn Street. So this slide is of the LDP designations, just to show the constraints affecting the site. So the yellow area is the archaeologically sensitive area, so you can see the building lies within that area. The pink line is the city centre shopping area. There's a small portion of the site within that. The blue shaded areas are conservation areas, so the closest one being the Lower Dock Street conservation area just to the south here, and then this is the town centre conservation area. The River Usk then is shaded purple because of its designation as a special area of conservation. To the proposals then. As I mentioned at the start, the application is for outline permission, so there are very few details to show you. What is required are some indicative parameters which have been provided on this plan. So here you can see the red outline of the application site and the existing building within. And then this is the outline, the indicative layout of a building covering the site. And then these are some very basic elevations, so showing roughly north, south, east, west. What it's showing us is that a building up to 35 metres could occupy the site. And the applicants also confirmed that the minimum height of the building could be 15 metres, which is equivalent to 3 stories. 35 metres is equivalent to around about 7 stories, I should say. And they've also confirmed the following parameters. So a maximum width of 86 metres, a minimum width of 40 metres, a maximum length of 105 metres, or a minimum length of 50 metres. So those are the indicative parameters. The point of those indicative parameters is to demonstrate that the site can accommodate a building within these parameters. And so the detail, like I said, of design, scale, appearance, landscaping, access, that comes at a later stage, and those are called the reserved matters. It's mentioned in the committee report, I should say, that reserved matters are not bound by the indicative parameters. That's not actually correct. But what it means to say is that although maximum height and layouts are shown, the reserved matters do not necessarily have to meet these maximums. So they can be within the minimum and maximums that I've just set out. Now, I mentioned the maximum height is 35 metres or 7 stories. Just want to put that into some context for you. So the multi-storey car park, the Kingsway car park there, is 8 stories. The university building is 6 stories. So up to 7 stories in between. So there's kind of a stepping down then from the multi-storey car park to the university building. Okay, so on to the main considerations then. So principle of development, regeneration and economic impact, flood risk, layout, landscape and public realm, ecology, protected sites and species, residential amenity, highway safety, heritage, archaeology, contamination and air quality. So I'll just run through each of those separately. So looking first then at the principle of development, its regeneration and economic impact first. As you're probably aware, planning permission was recently granted for a new leisure centre on Usk Way, and this would provide a swimming pool along with a range of other leisure facilities. You'll probably also be aware that the swimming pool in the existing leisure centre has been closed for about 2 years now, due to unviable maintenance costs. So with a new leisure centre coming forward for new and improved leisure facilities, it unlocks this site for regeneration. The range of uses is broad, but the site is within the settlement boundary and it's very close to the city centre. And it's considered that the uses proposed would complement those within the city centre and provide an opportunity to deliver good quality regeneration, which would contribute to the vitality and viability and the quality of the environment in the city centre. So it's considered that the proposals would represent an efficient use of brownfield land and additional job creation, which would help to boost the economy. So the broad principle of development is considered acceptable by officers, and the regeneration and economic impacts are considered positive. Looking then at flood risk, the site is currently located in flood zone B, as shown on the development advice maps. Zone Bs are areas where there's been some historical flooding, but generally the risk of flooding is low. However, Welsh Government and Natural Resources Wales have confirmed that these maps are now out of date, and there is more up-to-date flood map called the Flood Map for Planning. And since January 2022, we've been using these maps to inform planning decisions. And this flood map is the best available data for flooding, and it also includes the impacts of climate change. We're told by Welsh Government that is a material planning consideration, the new flood map. So the site, I'll show you, is here within this green area, and that shows that it's within flood zone 3. which means there's a 0.5% risk of flooding from the sea. So it's tidal, not from the river. And that includes climate change as well. So a flood consequence assessment has been submitted with the application. And as I set out in the committee report, there are some points to note. So hotels, education and leisure uses are classed as highly vulnerable development, as is the existing leisure centre. The other uses are less vulnerable developments. Also, a point to note, the FCA must consider the risk over the lifetime of a development, and proposed uses have different lifetimes of development. Most of the uses have a lifetime of development of 75 years, but all residential development has a lifetime of development of 100 years, and hotels are included in that residential category. So when we've considered the application, we've considered it on its kind of worst case scenario. So a development which is highly vulnerable over a lifetime of 100 years. So looking at the potential flooding of the building itself, the flood consequences assessment, which I'll refer to as a FCA from now on. So the FCA recommends that the finished floor levels should be raised to a minimum of 9.55 metres. And with this, during the most extreme flooding events, floodwaters are predicted to reach a maximum depth of 0.34 metres, and that's within tolerable limits of floodwater depth. In the less extreme event, the building would be flood-free, and that's over the 100 years I mentioned. So we're recommending a condition to ensure the building adheres to those recommended finished floor levels, and Natural Resources Wales haven't raised an objection in this respect. Another consideration of flood risk is access and egress to the building. So we need to be satisfied that people can leave the building safely during a flooding event. The FCA notes that there would be safe pedestrian access when heading north from the site, so up here, and then taking a left onto Usk Way, which you can see is white, so out of flood risk area. So during the most extreme flooding event, water depths would reach a height of 0.3 metres, 36 metres. Again, that's within tolerable limits. But it should also be noted that flooding is tidal. So there would be a good flood warning lead-in time, and that's expected to be in the region of 24 hours, or if not more. So with that amount of warning time, that would allow people to be able to safely evacuate the building without needing to navigate any floodwaters. So we're satisfied that providing we can secure a flood evacuation plan through a condition, that this element of flood risk would be manageable. The remaining consideration over flood risk concerns flood risk elsewhere as a result of the proposals. So the FCA notes that the development would involve raising ground and finished floor levels. And while we have details of those finished floor levels, we don't have detail of ground raising, mainly because the application is in outline, and we don't have, and that level of detail hasn't been finalised yet. Natural Resources Wales object because they're concerned that the FCA does not include this detail, and advise that land raising close to the river may impact conveyance routes around the development, so how floodwaters move around the development. And that has a potential then to affect flood risk to third parties. The applicants, flooding consultants, have sought to address the concerns, but NRW are maintaining their objection in the absence of the data. So we've considered those concerns raised by NLW, but because the application is in outline and the precise land take of the building isn't, and any associated ground raising is not yet known, so any certainties around flood water displacement or conveyance routes can't really be derived yet. So to appropriately tackle this issue, we're recommending a condition which requires the submission of an updated flood consequence assessment. And this will be required to inform the future design and layout of the building. And it has to identify any displacement of floodwaters and impacts to conveyance routes, and include mitigation if necessary. So we're satisfied with the imposition of that condition, that flood risk elsewhere can be appropriately managed. Turning then to the layout, landscape and public realm. As you can see, the building occupies the majority of the site, or it could occupy the majority of the site. And whilst we don't know the design of the building yet, we recognise that it's in a prominent location, and as such, going forward, we'd want to see a building with high quality design during the detailed submission. Notwithstanding this, though, the indicative layout does raise some concerns about its proximity then to Usk Way and also the Kingsway car park here. There was concern that the indicative layout doesn't allow really for enough room for good public realm or landscaping, and we wanted to see a setback from Usk Way. So to achieve that, we are recommending a condition which requires a minimum setback of 3 metres from Usk Way for its entire length along Usk Way. And then also another condition which requires the reserved matters application, so the detailed application, to demonstrate that there will be sufficient public realm between the building and the Kingsway car park, and also the restaurant units which sit within the Friars Walk development. So in this area here where my mouse is flickering, I guess. And then a further condition is recommended, which sets out the level of detail required when the landscaping proposals are submitted as part of the reserved matters. So it provides the level of detail that we want to see with that submission. Looking then at the ecology, protected sites and species, the site itself has very limited ecological value. The most notable feature are 4 cherry trees, which sit next to the junction with Usk Way and Emlyn Street. And even these trees have limited value, and it's proposed to remove them. The tree officer has no objection to this, in favour of some additional tree planting, which should form part of the detailed landscaping proposals. And we're also recommending a condition for a scheme of ecological enhancement, again to be provided at reserve matters stage. I showed you before that the site is in proximity to the River Usk, which is a special area of conservation, which is a European designation. We do not envisage there'll be any direct impacts on the river because of its distance away from it, but there could be, or there's potential for indirect impacts as a result of noise and vibration during the construction phase, and any pollution during the construction operational phases. So under the Habitats and Species regulations, we're required to carry out an appropriate assessment, which is contained within Appendix A of the committee report. But in summary, the appropriate assessment concludes that with the inclusion and implementation of conditions which require a construction environmental management plan, a piling methodology and timing restrictions, details of foul and surface water drainage, and a contamination investigation, that there would be no adverse impacts on the integrity of the River Usk Special Area of Conservation. And that's either on its own or in combination with other projects. We're required to consult with Natural Resources Wales on that assessment, and they've confirmed that they agree with the conclusions of the assessment. Looking now then at residential amenity, I'll keep it on this slide because it helpfully shows those residential properties in blue, which are located on Emlyn Street. They're about 20 metres away from the application site. The surrounding area is already a mix of commercial, educational, leisure and residential uses. And we considered that the redevelopment of the site for the uses proposed wouldn't really result in any additional harm to these neighbouring properties, given those uses in the area already and the urban nature of the site. We are recommending a number of conditions, though, requiring a noise assessment, restrictions on noise emitted from plant and equipment, details of any fume extraction and opening hours, and then also a demolition and a construction environmental plan also required through conditions to ensure that residential amenity is protected during those phases. Notwithstanding this, though, the height of the building so close to these residential properties has the potential to cause some adverse impacts, possibly as a result of overshadowing or loss of privacy. Going forward then through to the detailed design phase, we're satisfied that it could be designed so that windows don't face towards those residential properties or directly overlook them. We're also recommending then a condition which requires shadow analysis of the building and daylight tests to ensure that the building is appropriately designed and sited to protect the amenities of those residential properties. Turning then to highways, access is a reserved matter, but the planning design and access statement has indicating that the existing access on Emlyn Street would be retained. We expect matters concerning sort of servicing and manoeuvring within the site to be detailed then in the reserved matters submission. In terms of parking, the site is within parking zone 1. We do not require on-site parking provision for proposals in parking zone 1. It's within the city centre, it's close to public transport, and there are a number of public car parks nearby, so there are many options other than the private vehicle for accessing the site without creating any harmful impacts to neighbouring streets. Like I said, servicing will be a requirement, but that would be detailed in the reserved matters application. So the Highways Officer has no objection to the proposals, although a number of assessments, plans and details are required to be submitted with the reserved matters submission. And it's recommended that these are secured through conditions. On to heritage then. You would have seen the late representation on heritage matters. In short, the Historic Buildings and Conservation Officer agrees that the further consideration of impacts on the design and layout of the building on the conservation area can be given at reserved matters stage. And to secure this, we're recommending a condition which requires the submission of a heritage statement, which would detail how any negative impacts on heritage assets would be mitigated. On archaeology, again, you would have seen the late representation from the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, which confirms that there could be archaeological constraints to the site, although unlikely, given the likely disturbance caused by building the Newport Centre already. And we've included their condition, which requires a written scheme of investigation to be submitted. In terms of contamination, a desk study has been submitted. It notes the historical industrial uses of the site, which include a foundry, warehousing, a canal, highways and railway lines. That desk study notes the need for further investigation, and this investigation and any remediation would be secured through a recommended condition. And then lastly, air quality. It hasn't been included in the committee report, but we've had a late response from our scientific officer yesterday afternoon. They state that the proposed land uses at the site will have an impact on air quality in the locality, where we already have 2 air quality management areas with breaches of the air quality objective for nitrogen oxide. In view of this, the officer would expect an air quality assessment and the proposals for measures that will contribute towards reducing emissions in the locality. So measures such as electrical vehicle infrastructure, green infrastructure, active travel measures. So in view of this, a condition relating to air quality will be required. So we're recommending a condition which requires an air quality assessment and the identification of measures to contribute towards reducing emissions. So just to sum up then, officers are satisfied with the proposed development in outline, subject to the imposition of the conditions set out in the report. We consider the proposed uses will provide an opportunity to regenerate this site and contribute towards economic regeneration of the wider city centre. And we're recommending that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There's no speakers to this today, so does any members have any questions? Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I am a bit concerned actually with the application where it's over the height of like 7 stories to affecting the people of the residents of Emlyn Street. It looks like they're going to be confined into a small little box, you know, where the view is very bad. Also got concerns, is that the actual size of the actual building itself in that grey area of where it's going to go?
Just take you to this plan here.
Yeah.
So these are very basic plans. They're very indicative that they're providing a maximum height, width, length of the building, and it's just to demonstrate that, you know, that the site could accommodate a building of that size. Going forward to the detailed phase, you know, we'll get the actual design of the building, the layout of the site, and you know, there's an opportunity again at that point to ensure that the design is acceptable, that it doesn't have an impact on those residential properties. As I mentioned, there's a condition requiring shadow analysis, daylight tests to ensure, you know, neighbouring amenity is protected. So this is very much an indicative proposal. It doesn't have to be up to those maximum parameters.
So within the demolition part of it as well, and where the old leisure centre itself, how are they going to sort of alleviate any problems with the local shops around the area with dust and everything else? Could you put a condition with scaffolding around the old leisure centre building with polythene up it to stop the dust as well?
So normally, quite often we have the construction environmental management plan, which will provide all the measures that need to come forward to protect residential amenity or amenity in general of neighbouring uses. We've got 2 separate conditions. We're recommending 2 separate conditions. So one that tackles demolition on its own. So again, it will have to come they'll have to submit a demolition plan, demolition management plan to us, which will detail, you know, how they will protect residential amenity, general amenity, and we'll assess that with, you know, environmental health and highways to ensure that, you know, everything, all the measures that are in there will protect surrounding uses.
That'll come back then. I know that this is the reserve matters, and that'll come back to the committee then as well. Then
it will be a condition, so they need to discharge that condition before demolition could take place.
Sorry, Councillor Linton.
Thank you, Chair. This is an absolutely fantastic opportunity. I recommend this proposal to the city centre. It adds it brings a more modern building into the centre, whereas the building at the minute is actually outdated. It can cost too much to refurbish. I think it's a great opportunity for us to add another more modern building and bring more people into the city centre. I recommend and thank the officers for bringing up the shadowing effect that a new proposed the height of the building will have over the existing surrounding area, and also the setback that they've asked for, which will allow for more green planted areas, seating areas, and it doesn't overshadow the road either. So yes, I do recommend this application. Excellent use. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question on the flooding. Is that based on the river bursting its banks and flooding? And I think you said you'd get a 24-hour warning. I'm just concerned because you get 2 high tides within that period. Shouldn't it be a 12-hour warning?
Yeah, so the source of flooding is tidal at this point. Yeah, so the river is tidal at this point. So yes, it comes up and down. I mean, the flood consequence assessment is produced by experts in their area. They're advising that 24 hours is the lead-in time for a flood warning of a tidal nature. And Natural Resources Wales haven't agreed with that. We're recommending a condition to give us a flood evacuation plan to set out the precise detail really on how people would evacuate the building during that flood warning event.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ewells.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I share the comments of Councillor Linton's. Really good opportunity for this building to regenerate what is, you know, an old and struggling asset of, you know, the council of Newport Live. I do sort of share Councillor Jordan's concerns on the size of the building if it peaks at maximum. So it's sort of a much sort of bigger, denser building than is currently there if it goes to the maximum. By granting sort of outline permission with those parameters, are we sort of fettering our discretion to then sort of reduce the size of it a bit when it comes back at reserve matters? Because my concern would be I'd want to see something a little bit smaller. I know you've conditioned it 3 metres from the highway, that side, but it's very close the other side to both the car park, taking away the disabled spaces at the front and that sort of area. And I'd want to sort of be sure we're not sort of leaving ourselves open to we have to agree to the maximum because we've given outline for it.
I mean, when we consider the reserve matters submission, details of the design and layout are up for us to reconsider all of those matters again. You know, there's a minimum and a maximum range here. You know, we've got those conditions in place to ensure that there's good public realm next to the Kingsway building and the Friars Walk restaurant units. That setback from Usk Way, the impact on the residential properties. So, you know, it is indicative. if it's unacceptable in sort of the layout and design terms, then you can refuse reserved matters. But obviously, until we see that detail, we can't say just yet.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I accept the devil's in the detail in terms of the reserve matters application. I guess what I'm sort of worried about is if we grand outline now, that accepts that we're prepared to go up to the maximum, which to me appears really big. If we then refuse that on reserve matters, are we at risk of sort of that being overturned on an appeal because we said in the first place that you could go up to this maximum? Or, should we be saying actually the maximum should be less than what is there? Does that make sense? Sorry.
Yeah, well, the application is the maximum parameter. That is what you would be granting, subject to the conditions that are imposed that sort of help us inform what comes in at reserve matters and helps us assess what comes in at reserve matters. So, yes, the maximum parameter is what's being granted, subject to those conditions.
Cheers, thanks, that's fine.
Okay, thanks. So are there any more questions from anybody? Okay, so I want to make sure that everybody received the late representation paper yesterday. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So the proposal is that we accept this with conditions. Are there any proposers, please? Councillor Ewell, second. Councillor Perkins, thank you. Can we show of hand for all those in favour? Okay, I think that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. And then the last agenda item is appeals decision, and I think this is just for information only. Yep. Okay, thank you all very much.